In a day and age where the notion of quote-unquote dead fighting games runs rampant, I personally don't like to label games this way, even if they are very niche, because I find it to be an insult to those still playing. A great example of this phenomenon is Tatsunoko vs Capcom, because even though most mainstream fighting game consumers wouldn't be able to pronounce the game's name, there's still an active scene for the game that consistently runs events, preventing it from becoming dead. But what if we go down the rabbit hole of fighting games that have literally 0 players? Games so obscure that even your hipster friend whose entire personality is obscure internet media wouldn't even know about. Okay, maybe he does know about it. By using Fightcade search tools, I'm able to scroll past popular fighting games, obscure fighting games, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 to uncover the true dead fighting games. The ones that have no active worldwide players at all. By the way, the definition I would use to classify a dead fighting game is if literally no one is playing it at any given moment. Also, the term forgotten fighting games is one that is hyperbolic in nature, as even though people will have heard of the games we're about to cover, they still have 0 Fightcade players, so I just wanted to clear that up. Anyway, with how accessible online play is for a variety of games nowadays, not many titles reach a total player base of 0, even ones that have a reputation for being dead. Instead, we're going to be covering 4 games that are well and truly buried 6 feet beneath the ground, and I hadn't even heard of some of these games before when I was scrolling through Fightcade. Let's not only analyze these games to see if they're enjoyable by today's standards, but also to think of some reasons as to why no one is playing them. We're going to pull the rug off these games that haven't seen sunlight in years, so join me, dear viewer, as we explore the world of forgotten fighting games. Normally, we'd think of the Marvel vs Capcom series when expecting to see a Marvel-related fighting game, but Avengers and Galactic Storm is totally different. It's true that it features popular Marvel comic book characters and an assist system, but this is really its own beast, and it has more in common with the King of Fighters over Marvel vs Capcom. There are 4 buttons here for a total of 2 punches and 2 kicks, and you can use a bar of meter to call on your assist. Movement tools include walking, jumping, dashing, and hopping, so there are multiple ways for players to traverse around the screen, and you can perform some awesome combos by combining forward movement with attacks, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Galactic Storm has 9 playable characters, and although Captain America is instantly recognizable to even the most casual of Marvel fans, the other characters are really obscure. I've never even heard of Black Knight, Thunderstrike, Crystal, etc., so it was really good fun going through the character roster to experiment with all the characters. In addition to looking and sounding different, they also play completely differently, and there are archetypes here to fit most fighting game fans' preferred playstyles. Dr. Minerva is great for high mobility with fast walk speed, a wall cling, a forward moving sweep, and a Psycho Crusher. Shatteraxe is fantastic at keep away and playing lane with very oppressive zoning tools and an insane backdash. Black Knight can rush down and use strong pokes to force the enemy into block strings, and Captain America is the ultimate all-rounder, just to name a few. These aren't the only characters in the game, however, as other famous characters like Iron Man and Thor show up as assists. Having assist-only characters feels straight out of Marvel vs Capcom 1, and they each have different moves for players to use, but there's a catch. Because the main roster is divided between the Avengers and the Kree, they can only use assists that belong to their faction. For instance, Captain America can call in the Vision, but he can't rely on Ultimus. Having comic book lore and character relationships impact gameplay is something that I really like, and even though there's a modified version of the game that lets you pick any assist with any character, I don't mind the vanilla game's restriction. Personally, I like using Captain America with Iron Man in the back. Cap is super straightforward to use, and it's not that hard to do big damage, even if you're a new player. With solid normals, keep outs, instant overheads, and godlike damage output, America's most patriotic hero is essentially the ultimate protagonist character. Another assist is Giant Man, and I'm sure you might have seen this in the past. His massive arm comes flying in from the side of the screen to squeeze the enemy via a hit grab, and you can even use this to start combos. It's safe to say that Avengers in Galactic Storm is pretty wild, so how come lots of people aren't playing it? I mean, there's a full-blown Mizumi wiki page for the game, and there's even a dedicated Discord server, so there's got to be an active player base. Not having people in the vanilla game in Fightcade makes sense since there's a version with more characters and assists, but even that's empty. In my opinion, I believe that if the average person is going to install Fightcade and look for a fighting game with Marvel characters, then they're going to play Capcom's offerings instead. Galactic Storm isn't bad, far from it, but it's not as instantly appealing as something like Children of the Atom or even X-Men vs Street Fighter, and as those games have established long-lasting legacies, it makes sense why more people would flock to those titles. Also, Galactic Storm's character roster is filled with iconic characters such as, who the hell is that? And, I've never seen him before in my life. So it goes without saying that the character roster here isn't going to win anyone over unless they're a really big fan of Thunderstrike and his mullet. I'm good. The game's visual style is also interesting, to say the least. The characters here look like they're all made out of some weird material, and whether it's clay, plastic, paper mache, or Agent Orange, I really couldn't tell you. I don't think it looks bad, but it's certainly not as stylish or attention-grabbing as the other video game depictions of these classic characters. Some of their animations can also look a little bit wonky, and while this can all run the risk of delegitimizing Galactic Storm as a serious title, there's a very captivating yet unintentional comedic element that runs wild throughout the whole game, and I'll never be able to take Giant Man's assist seriously. Look at him go! Avengers in Galactic Storm is actually pretty fun, and if you can get past its really weird visual style, you can have a lot of fun with the game, so I recommend trying it out with a friend. It's a shame that no one is playing it as of me making this video, so maybe you guys can revive the game and force people to take it seriously. Move over, City of the Wolves, because Captain America is about to touch of death you.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
Okay, so you're telling me that an early 2000s collaboration between Sega and Capcom based on a beloved media property that allows 4 people to battle in real time and features music from Megadeth has 0 people playing it? What? Dude, this game sounds awesome, so let's explore. Released in 2001 for arcades and the Dreamcast, Heavy Metal Geomatrix is a 3D arena fighter, and it takes inspiration from other Capcom games like Power Stone and Spawn in the Demon's Hand. Before we even analyze the gameplay mechanics and player base, I have to say that this game is what you would get if you gave an ADHD-riddled 12-year-old a bunch of alcohol, heavy metal CDs, and a lethal amount of Ritalin. Everything about this game is so loud, bombastic, and in your face that it would definitely keep my neighbors up if I played it without headphones. Moving on to the gameplay now, there are lots of features here, but once you get the hang of it, everything feels quite natural. You can lock on, fire, melee attack, jump, special attack, and slide out of the way. And all of this reminds me a bit of Armored Core. Every character has certain statistics and weapons that you have to take into account, so finding the right character for you is step 1. Personally, I'm a Slash fan, as I love her animations and cool name. Running around the map as a crazy biker girl is good fun, and I think her voice lines are pretty awesome too.
Who wants to die first? Huh, they don't call me Flash for nothing.
The downside of picking Slash, however, is that she has the lowest health value in the game, so there's a glass cannon element to her character design. Zeus is slow but powerful, Mayfly prioritizes quick movement over everything else, and Sarge is an all-rounder. All the characters play the same on a base level, however, and this is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it allows players of all skill levels to pick up and play the game with any character that they like, but it also means that these fighters can start to feel a bit samey over time. They each have different personalities and appearances, which is excellent, and they're all grouped together on the character select screen. There are 4 factions with 3 characters each, so there are 12 in total, which is a nice amount. Also, you can freely traverse around the environment however you want, and this provides the game with a lot more, I guess, openness than most other arcade titles. The stages here aren't very large, but this means that you're always within range of the opponent so you can't get lost. Geomatrix encourages players to rapidly move around as fast as possible to dodge incoming fire and pick up new weapons, so it has super kinetic pacing. Words can't describe how excited I was playing this game with many of its awesome characters, and although it can get a bit repetitive over time in single player, it's really solid in multiplayer. I tried it out with a friend of mine online, and we had a blast running around and shooting each other.
This is my friend, please subscribe to his YouTube channel, thank you.
Before I even finished my first arcade run, I was instantly taken aback by the presentation and the music of Geomatrix, and it all screams the early 2000s. You know those ultra-masculine games and movies where you shoot everything and there's loud music and politically incorrect humor and Kane being a necrophiliac on live television during an episode of WWE? Yeah, Heavy Metal Geomatrix is one of those games, and I love it. Okay, after I calmed down, I did some more research into the game only to find out that it has a 58 on Metacritic. Huh? I understand this game isn't curing cancer or anything, but a 58? It's important to note that these reviews were written about the Dreamcast port, and if you go into this game expecting a long-lasting single-player experience, then you'll be disappointed. Geomatrix is all about short bursts of entertainment that, while super fun, don't last for very long, and I think this sums up a lot of arcade games at the time. There's also an extra mode called Chaos Matrix on the home port that provides new missions, but it doesn't dramatically shake up the game. As for the non-existent player base, I believe that it's because of the relative obscurity of the title. I'm not sure if many people, especially the mainstream, know about the Heavy Metal IP in the first place, let alone the 2001 video game that was released on a discontinued console, and this is really a major disappointment. I mean, I'm sure there's at least one other person out there who would like this game, and I hope to play more online matches sometimes. I also believe that due to its strong early 2000s aesthetic, some players may be turned away if it doesn't appeal to them, but this makes me respect Geomatrix on an artistic level, believe it or not. It's a licensed game at the end of the day, I know, but nothing else in Capcom's repertoire of arcade classics has a similar aesthetic to this, and I admire its uniqueness. Heavy Metal Geomatrix isn't for everyone, but if you get it, then you get it, and it's a mighty fun time. Hey, what were you doing with that? Okay, now I've got to try to fix this, so just give me a moment. Aha, there we go. This next game is the oldest so far, and it's made by SNK, so you know that we're in for something really cool. King of the Monsters 2 is a kaiju fighting game which is very unique for the genre, and seeing big monsters in games battle each other is always good fun. This game is pretty simple. You pick your monster, and then you go to town on not just your opponent, but also the unfortunate city that finds itself underneath 2 massive beasts. Unlike most fighting games where you fight the big and scary final boss right at the end, every encounter in King of the Monsters 2 feels like a major boss fight, so this could be described as a boss rush game. But before you start fighting, you need to select a monster, and there are 3 in total. This is a very small character roster, but at least the monsters look different from each other, so there's some decent variety here visually. King of the Monsters 2 does have a lot more cool looking characters, but they're the enemies you fight, so it's clear that the boss fights are its major focus. If the idea of an arcade boss rush with monsters doesn't appeal to you, then you might want to play something else, but for the rest of us who actually have souls, this game is really cool. There are only 3 buttons here, punch, kick, and jump, so it's not too hard to get started. By holding down punch or kick, you can charge up a special move like the Geo Sword for example, but it gets even better, because leveling up your monster during a fight gives them new special moves that are even more devastating, and some of this is natural disaster level. All 3 of the playable monsters have unique normal and special moves, although they do play the same on a surface level, so it's a bit like heavy metal Geomatrix in this regard. The most impressive quality of this game overall, at least in my opinion, is the presentation. I mean, the whole game seems like it would be terrifying for those living in the hyper-specific land of American City, and I feel bad for the citizens living below. King of the Monsters 2 does an amazing job of using its visuals and audio to make these battles feel like they're on a super large scale, and it's really exciting. Seeing the city below go up in flames before the military starts sending helicopters, boats, and who knows what else to stop you is a spectacular touch, and it perfectly fuels the player's power fantasy. The monsters scream in pain when they fall to the ground, and the music is very upbeat, providing King of the Monsters 2 with a very satisfying sense of speed. The monsters may be quite large, but they're not that slow, believe it or not, so you can expect to move around the screen in a short amount of time. The only problem I have with this arcade single-player mode is that it gets old after a while, and although every single level has a brand new monster for you to do battle with, you feel as though you've seen it all around the halfway point. Fun single-player levels are nice and all, but the real meat and potatoes of any fighting game are the multiplayer offerings, and King of the Monsters 2 has some interesting features. Not only can you battle one-on-one with another person, but you can also team up to fight an AI-controlled monster. Having both of these options readily available from the get-go is a brilliant addition, and it eliminates some of the single-player mode's monotony. During my playthroughs of the game, I had a thought of King of the Monsters 2 potentially being maybe style over substance. The visuals, audio, and general concept are awesome, but the gameplay is very simple and there's nothing executionally demanding to learn. As far as I can tell, there's no combo system or advanced movement options for players to incorporate into their strategies, and only having 3 playable characters that all use the same inputs for their moves is a bit uninventive, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. At the end of the day, look, this is a game about skyscraper-sized monsters fighting each other to the death while destroying polite society, and I believe that the best way to experience it all is to switch your brain off and just enjoy the game for what it is. Honestly, I'm not sure why no one is playing this on Fightcade. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to see anyone playing it in a competitive sense, but it's a good game to kill some time with when you're on a Discord call with friends, so I wish there were some online battles to spectate. I believe that the best audience for a game like this is people who enjoy kaiju media who also lack experience with fighting games. What I mean by this is that if you're new to the fighting game genre and you just want to see big characters wrestle with each other, then you're not going to think about gameplay complexity, and you can just have fun with it. Hyper-intellectual, this game is not, but it's also not trying to be, so I really hope more people jump in here and experience the insanity that is King of the Monsters 2. This final game is the most obscure on the list, and I could barely find any information about it online, but I was able to find a very passionate Discord server with an easily accessible breakdown of the game's mechanics, so a big shout out goes to Discord user CrowSpaceboy for the following information. Giant Gram 2000 All Japan Pro Wrestling 3, or just Giant Gram for short, is a wrestling arcade game developed by Sega. As a result of this title being a Japanese exclusive, none of the in-game text is in English, so I have no idea what any of this means. If only I weren't a filthy gaijin. Even though Giant Gram focuses more on the athletic component of professional wrestling more than the theatrics, there are still some killer moves here, ranging from painful looking strikes to grabs that I'm sure would actually kill me in real life. So for those of you who really enjoy wrestling characters in fighting games, this one's for you. Despite focusing on Japanese wrestling specifically, Giant Gram borrows some of Virtua Fighter and Dead or Alive's DNA through its button layout. You can strike, throw, hold, taunt, and run, and these buttons can perform combos and grapples when combined with directional inputs. If you're like me when I first started playing, you might be wondering what the difference between a throw and a hold is, and this is only the first question of the Giant Gram rabbit hole. Basically, a hold initiates a catch throw that lets the initiator move around and attack their opponent in a variety of ways. You can punch them head on, move behind them, etc., and this creates mind games as both players have to figure out what to input next, whereas the throw is an unblockable attack with small range, although they can be teched by an opponent with good reactions. Reversals are a big part of Giant Gram, and you'll usually get some text on the bottom of the screen telling you how to perform them. Another major aspect are combos, but these work differently to how you'd expect. Instead of having normal fighting game combos where you just hit the enemy a bunch of times and call it a day, you can actually parry or block attacks in this game during hit stun, preventing follow-up attacks. This means that the only true combos are the ones that involve your opponent facing the wrong way, as when in this position they can't defend themselves. There's also another type of attack, and it takes place when the colors become inverted after a big strike. This screen filter indicates that the highlighted body part has taken damage, and if it keeps receiving punishment, then it'll eventually break. For example, if your character's leg gets broken and your opponent attempts to pin you via a leg submission, the pain will be too much for them to bear, and they'll give up. This is pretty hardcore, but it's also realistic if you think about it, and it adds more strategy into the game. All of this is well and good, there's nothing wrong with it, but we haven't even gotten to the best part yet. Over the course of the match, what's known as your fighting spirit will increase, and when it's maxed out, press the 4 attack buttons to activate max mode. King of Fighters this is not, but once you activate it, you can't be pinned, you instantly recover from being knocked down to the ground, and you can't take specific body part damage anymore, so it's a very strong install. The big draw of max mode, however, is that you get access to an unblockable super called a burning technique. If you use this move at the right time, it can win you the game, so pick your spots carefully. But it also wouldn't be wrestling without, well, the wrestlers, and this game has a very interesting roster. I have no idea who any of these guys are, but it's cool to see some Westerners here, especially this Hagrid looking guy. I'm not gonna lie and say that the visuals have aged very well, but seeing these old school character models with face textures pasted onto them is a very nostalgic visual style, and it reminds me of how you could create your own character in the old Tony Hawk games. The fighting animations can also look a bit jank, but I feel that this adds to the game's charm. Giantgram reminds me of those crazy Japanese arcade games like Bishi Bashi, and that one game where you stick your hands up some guy's butt, so the insanity is really appreciated by me. All of these wrestlers have their own moveset, so finding the right one for you is part of Giantgram's learning process. They all look pretty vicious, especially this wrestler who looks like he's from the old country, and I wouldn't want to mess with him in a dark alleyway. Anyway, even though I have no idea what his name is, I went with this guy as I thought he looked pretty neat. He has a move where you can chop your chest with the funniest animation I've ever seen in a wrestling game, and even though I have no idea what his combos or special throws are, I know that it's my destiny to main him. Going back to Fightcade itself for a moment, I find it interesting how there are no people playing Giantgram 2000. The game received a home port for the Dreamcast with some new features, but even that is empty, and the only person in the arcade version's lobby is myself. I'm quite stumped, because even though the Giantgram Discord server is quite small, it still has multiple channels for those who wish to learn how to play, and you can easily find discussions about the game's meta, characters, mechanics, etc., so I wonder why no one here is in the Fightcade lobby. Look, I'm sure there's a good reason, and I don't want to put this whole server on blast, but I'm just a bit confused, that's all. Before we wrap up, I'll also add that even if you're a total scrub like me, you can easily have a good time by just button mashing and figuring things out on the fly. The lack of complicated motion inputs makes wrapping your head around the basics quite a simple task, and as every character in this game is a wrestler, there are no weird or unorthodox character archetypes for you to learn. Overall, Giantgram 2000 is very enjoyable, and I'm glad that I gave it a go. I had a lot of fun with all 4 games that we just covered, but as I was playing through them throughout the week, I started to realize something that seems obvious but is often taken for granted. There are amazing, really quirky, unique, beautiful games out there that are ridiculously easy to experience through Fightcade, and yet they have 0 people playing them, and this is quite a shame. I'm sure that many talented developers over the years put lots of time, effort, and passion into creating all of these games, and seeing no one play them is a bit heartbreaking. If I had to guess, I would say that the people playing popular games like Third Strike, Super Turbo, and the King of Fighters 2002, etc. make up a large bulk of the Fightcade install base. So if you've always wanted to be that postmodern, downtrodden fighting game hipster that hates the mainstream with every fiber of your being, click on the Fighter tab, scroll through the pages a couple times, and then run the set in whatever obscure game that catches your interest. Okay, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate it. There are so many more games to cover, so I might even make a part 2, and if that's something you'd like to see in the future, let me know in the comments. Okay, thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.